A metonym. Anyone from the class? A metonym basically is a word that represents a whole. For example, by saying Islamabad, we mean Pakistan, right? By saying capital, we mean a country. So when we talk that Islamabad is all there to eradicate virus from Pakistan. So Islamabad here refers to a country. So metonym basically is a word that refers to a whole. By saying a word, we mean a whole. So here, when we read this word house, this house may represent a country. It may represent uh, a place. So ruin of a great house may represent to a country. So this is a metonym that we are taking here. So Derek Walcott basically is talking of the Caribbean, ruins of a great house. By bringing in this analogy of a house, he would talk of the great colonial adventures in the Caribbean. You know that as I have talked in the previous class that in this 17th, 18th, and 19th century uh, is largely regarded as the imperialist or the colonial centuries because the great empires like Great Britain, they were all set to extract the wealth and riches of the poor nation. And this was the case with Caribbean also because they remained subjugated or colonized for these 3 centuries. And slave trade and plantation trade were the major concerns of the imperialists in that region. So this poem is also referring to that plantation trade and slave trade, and we would see the references in it, and we'd see how beautifully the poet has given a literary touch to a catastrophic happening of 17th, 18th, and 19th century. Ruins of a great house. Stones only. The disjecta membra of this great house, whose moth-like girls are mixed with candle dust, remain to file the lizard's dragonish claws. The mouths of those gate cherubs shriek with stain. Axle and couch wheel silted under the muck of cattle droppings. 3 crows flap for the trees and settle creaking the eucalyptus boughs. A smell of dead limes quickens in the nose, the leprosy of empire. Farewell green fields, farewell ye happy groves. See, the poet has started with the destruction or the scene of destruction of a house. This great house basically has turned into stones or mere shingles, stones only. Everywhere stones are shattered, and the house is depicting a picture of destruction or decimation. And the people living in that house, like whose moth-like girls were like moths who were, all the time roaming around in the daylight, whose moth-like girls are mixed with candle dust. Now they are nowhere to be seen. They have become dust. Remain to file the lizard's dragonish claws. Now only we can see that the walls of the house are there in order to sharpen the lizard's claws, because lizards are there and nobody is living in that house, because that house is an utter destruction. and nobody is able to live in that house now. The mouth of those great cherubs, cherubs are, the guards, or we may call them big birds that are guarding the gates. These are the biblical creatures who save, or who are the guards of the doors. So the mouth of those great cherubs shriek with stain, they're shrieking with stain, axle and coach wheel silted under the muck of cattle dropping, means coach and its axle is covered under the dirt or waste of the cattle, uh, and it is not visible enough, because the poet is giving an image of destruction in that house. So this is a perfect imagery. We can recall, we can just make a mental picture by reading these words, that what kind of house that would be, that has got this kind of description, where we have the wheels silted under the muck of cattle droppings, and lizards have their free roaming in that house, and dust is all around, stones are shattered everywhere. So this imagery shows the utter destruction of that house. Three crows flap for the trees. Three crows. Crow basically is the symbol of evil, of course, because we see when something bad happens, we think that the crows would be around. So this crowing, or the crows, are taken as ominous, or the symbol of evils. So three crows flap for the trees. Where there is destruction, we can see these crows all the time. So three crows flap for the trees and settle, creaking the eucalyptus boughs. And there is a tree of eucalyptus where they are roosting. These crows are roosting, and that tree is being broken. A smell of dead limes quickens in the nose, the leprosy of empire. So this line is very important. The smell of dead limes quickens in the nose, the leprosy of empire. Means this lime plantation was a very profitable trade of the Great Britain or the empire. So now when they have gone, everything has been smashed. And those dead limes, the limes which have been cut down, these trees, they're deciduous trees, of course. A smell of dead limes quickens in the nose, the leprosy of the empire. And this is the disease left by the empire, because it reminds the poet of that lime trade that the Britisher had with the local or black slaves, right? The black slaves were the source of ripening or cultivating those lime trees. But now, when everything is gone, these remnants, or this debris, is a kind of reminder of that catastrophe that was let loose by the empire on this region. So a smell of dead limes quickens in the nose, the leprosy of empire. It means that this disease left by empire is still haunting the locals, the natives. And this poet or the speaker is one of the natives, so he can recall the events, or remind us of the events that happened in this region. And he is of the view that when there is empire, farewell green fields, farewell ye happy groups. So uh, nothing remains happy, or there is no greenery, or there is no peace in the region when the empire is around. So it's very alarming, or it's quite terrifying for the facts that were there with the natives, that these things, these shattered things or destructed houses, are reminding them of the havoc that was waged on the local people by the empire. So uh, the poet has very wonderfully linked this poetic expression with an event in history, that the empire was so cruel on the locals that uh, when it left, it turned everything barren, or it turned everything useless or futile. So marble like Greece, like Falconer South in stone. So he is again referring to the beauty of that place before the arrival of the empire. Marble like Greece. So every building was beautified with marbles. The way the marbles are used in Greece. Greece is famous for using marbles in factory. Sorry, in buildings. So here, it was like marbles like Greece, like Faulkner South. And he is referring to William Faulkner, of course, who writes about South America, and he mentions the beauty of South America. And marble like Greece, like Faulkner South in stone, deciduous beauty prospered and is gone. Deciduous beauty, short-term beauty, the beauty that was once at that place, and it was intact at that place, but now it was no more, because the empire had you know corrupted that beauty and destroyed that beauty to the core. Deciduous beauty prospered and is gone. Once it was in the heydays, and now it is no more. But where the lawn breaks in a rash of trees, a spade below dead leaves will ring the bone of some dead animals or human thing fallen from evil days, from evil times. So he takes a shift from this building towards lawn, and he talks that where this lawn is leading us to, and he refers to a spade that is lying below the leaves, that shows that somebody has buried someone under the soil when probably during that time of slave trade and plantation trade. So a spade below dead leaves will ring the bone of some dead animal or human being. Some human being or an animal has been buried under this earth by that spade, and uh, he also refers to fallen from evil days, those evil days when the slaves were tortured and they were asked to work day and night in order to cultivate that land. So fallen from evil days and from evil times, and those evil days and times are referring to the cruel period of empire that remained here in order to extract wealth or extract resources of this country. So when we talk of resources, we are referring to lime trade. So this lime trade was very much in at that time because it provided vitamin C to the soldiers, British soldiers, and it also was a source of income to the empire. So it was very important for them, along with the slave trade, because they would have slaves with them who would cultivate that lime fields, and also they would sell those slaves to other countries in order to earn money. So those were the evil days and those were the evil times. It seems that the original crops were limes. It seems, I mean, he refers to that time. It seems that the original crops were limes grown in that silt that clogs the river's skirt. So, uh, lime, he's referring to the landscape where those crops were cultivated. The imperious rakes are gone. Imperial rakes means the imperial persons who were very arrogant at their status because they thought they were superior. The imperious rakes are gone now, their bright girls gone, the river flows, obliterating hurt. He says that those people have gone now, but this river is flowing, and it is having many secrets in his chest, because it is flowing and obliterating some hurt. Hurt means those pains and sufferings are being uh, you know embraced by this river. I climbed a wall with the grill ironwork. I climbed a wall with the grill ironwork of exiled craftsmen protecting their great house. So these craftsmen are, of course, the slaves or the local people who did that grill ironwork in order to protect the masters. I climbed a wall with the grill ironwork of exiled craftsmen protecting that great house from guilt. From guilt means probably when somebody is looting and plundering a country's resources, he might have some guilt, but that guilt is some way wiped out when somebody tells you of some moral superiority and someone else tells you about your moral superiority. So that guilt is guarded or removed by the local craftsman, perhaps, but not from the worms rent. Worms rents. It means uh, that now initially it was for the protection of those masters, but now what happens is that worms are all around, not from the padded cavalry of the mouse, and the mouse, nobody can stop mouse to go in, and worms are there now because the masters have gone and nobody is living in that house, and that house is not worth living. And when a wind shook in the lime trees, those trees, I heard what Kipling heard: the death of a great empire, the abuse of ignorance by Bible and by sword. Now, this is an allusion or reference to Kipling because Kipling is considered one of the imperialist novelist and poet, and he would defend the empire, and he would prefer uh, or he would propagate the ideology of white man's burden. And white man's burden is to civilize this world through missionary zeal, and that missionary zeal is, of course, using Bible, and through power or force, and that is sword. So the abuse of ignorance by Bible and by sword. So the poet is of the view that this, wind that is touching the limes, and it reminds me of the settlement or the um, justification of the settlement of the colonizers in this region. And this way he refers to Kipling. Kipling is one of the imperialist novelists I've just told you. So a green lawn broken by a low walls of stone, dipped to the rivulet and pacing. I thought next of men like Hawkins, Walter Raleigh, Drake, Anstrel murderers and poets. So now he is of the view that these seafarers or these travelers like Hawkins, Walter Raleigh, and Drake, because these were the travelers who would travel through sea in order to explore the new land. So these were the explorers. And he calls them poets also. Walter Raleigh is a poet, but Hawkins and Drake are the travelers basically. I thought next of a men like Hawkins, Walter Raleigh, Drake, ancestral murderers and poets, more perplexed in memory now by every ulcerous crime. So he says that this landscape or this lawn or this house and everything that is around reminds him of those adventurers or seafarers or travelers who explored this Caribbean for the empire. And because these people were directly involved in slave trade, Hawkins and Drake were directly involved in slave trade. So that's why he is calling them murderers, and and he is abusing them for their crimes that they did, ulcerous crimes, that the crimes they did in this region. The world is green. The world's green age then was rotting lime and green. The world's green age was rotting lime, whose stench became the charnel galleon's text. So the rot remains with us, the men are gone. So he says that uh, the core purpose of the empire there was to extract something from those lime, and but now what we have is the dead body, the remains of those things, and it reminds of all that suffering that the brethrens or the people from that region had when when they were colonized by the empire. So he says the rot remains with us. It is with us now. The men are gone. Now the men are gone, but the rot is with us. It reminds us of those sufferings. But as dead ash is lifted in a wind that fans the blackening ember of the mind, that it reminds us when wind is lifting that ash, it reminds of, and my eyes burned from the ashen prose of dawn. So dawn, sorry, done. So he is referring here to Donne, prose of Donne, and he says that uh, because the poet John Donne wrote Meditations when he was ill. So he is trying to relate his situation with John Donne, that his eyes are burning, that he is feeling ill on visualizing the situation that he is in at the moment. So he is trying to relate the rot or the remnant of that catastrophe. He's trying to relate it with his own life, and he's trying to be in that situation. Ablaze with rage, I thought. Then he is in rage. After seeing this, he is in rage. Ablaze with rage, I thought. Some slave is rotting in the manorial lake. That stench that was coming from there, he thought that some slave is rotting in the manorial lake. So the lake nearby is giving a stench. It means that some slave of that time is still rotting. But still the coal of my compassion fought. But there is another thought. And what is that thought? That Albion too was once a colony like ours. Albion, England. That England too was once a colony like ours. So now he is turning the table. Initially, he was criticizing what the empire did with the local people or with the Caribbean, but now he's justifying that Albion too was once a colony like ours. The England was a colony like ours, part of the continent, piece of the main. Now, this phrase has been taken from Milton, part of the continent, piece of a man. So that everything is a part of a whole. So that Albion was too once a colony like ours. So England had to face, or England shares the fate with us, a fate of colonization with us, because they remained the colony of Rome, Roman Empire, and they also had suffrage, and they bore their suffrage, and they admit their uh, the abuse that they were done by the Romans. So a colony like ours, part of the continent, piece of the main. Nook shorten, rook overblown, deranged. So these are the words taken from Shakespeare. Nook shorten means there is no corner, short of corner. It does not have any corner. It is deranged. It is not arranged. So how can one define that if some catastrophe or affliction or any pain is inflicted by someone else, what should one do? So it does not have any corner to explain. By forming channels and the vain expense of bitter faction, so what should one do? All in compassion ends. It ends on one thing so differently from what the heart arranged, so differently from what the heart arranged, but it's quite different from what one feels, as well as if a manner of thy friends. So it seems that this house or the manor belongs to one of your friends. So basically, uh, the poet is of the view that these sufferings are part of one's experiences, and they should be taken differently, because uh, sometimes it happens when someone is unable to bear. So he thinks that what should we do now? What's the point lamenting on something that has happened? Is there any recluse, or is there any kind of uh, consolation? So in this way, uh, this recognition of humanity's plight comes as a surprise in this poem at the end, because past atrocities have to be faced, abuse and death admitted, and those who misuse their power brought to book. So one cannot do what has it cannot be undone. What has been done cannot be undone. But what one has in his hand is that the misuse of power may be brought into the book. Uh, there is a question then, yet how can these wounds be fully healed when there are so many reminders of a past Rotan regime? The way he has talked quite frequently that these rods are with us, but men are gone. These are the symbols of that destruction. The rods are the symbols of destruction in front of them. So how can those wounds be healed when there are so many reminders of a past rotten regime in one's homeland, and that is continuing somewhere else in the world right at this moment? Means if it is happening in this place, it happened in this place, that might be happening somewhere else also. Finally, means this is the strength of this poem. It makes the reader think about the history of power and domination and abuse on a local and global scale. So this is quite political side of the poem, that it shakes the very foundation of imperialism, and it talks of humanity or philanthropy that should be the course of the time. So this is all about this poem, and this poet is quite famous for his association with Caribbean or West Indies, and although he has good feelings for English language, he still loves his own culture and thought. And we have seen that how he has highlighted, or he has brought into limelight the cruel aspects of colonization and imperialism in his area. The way he talked in A Far Cry from Africa, his double affiliation he showed. So similarly, here we can see that he is following the tradition of English poetry. He is referring to English poets, and he is taking from Shakespeare, Milton, Donne, and at the same time, he is criticizing uh, the colonizers of the Great Britain. So his ambivalent attitude is also found in this poem also, because we see that he has double or mixed feelings of attraction and repulsion. Although he is repelling in the beginning of this poem, by the end he says that um, the fate of England is no different, because it remained the colony of Roman Empire. So it had also faced abuse and pains and sufferings. So this is quite similar. One cannot detach, or an island cannot detach itself from the world. So everything is part of the world. Basically, he wants to harmonize or integrate the associations or countries. So this is all about from this poem. If you have any questions, you may ask now. Hello. Your questions, please.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Ali?
Sir, there is a line part of the continent. It is from Milton.
Yes.
And what does it mean?
Means we are the part of a whole. We cannot detach ourselves from the world. So nothing is in piece or part, but it is the part of a whole. Means everywhere there is a connection.